Hey there, thanks for joining us on the Chief Executive Aviator. I'm Simon Turner, your host, and you're wondering what we're all about. Well, we're pilots who happen to run businesses, or maybe we're business people who happen to fly. Either way, we've figured out that flying gives us a serious edge. Every week, I sit down with another pilot entrepreneur or executive who's discovered that their plane isn't just some cool ride, it's actually a secret weapon for growing their business. We're talking real stories about landing deals and actual landings, expanding markets, and yes, still making it home in time for dinner. Whether you're already flying for business or you're just dreaming about it, you're going to hear some pretty amazing stories about how aviation changes the trajectory of lives and businesses every day. So get your pre-flight done. We've got a great conversation headed your way. All right. Well, good day, everyone, and welcome to Preston Holland, often referred to as the private jet guy. And he's actually the CEO of Prestige Aircraft Finance, or Prestige Aero. And he specializes in aircraft finance, which is a pretty important part of flying for your business and being an entrepreneurial aviator. So welcome, Preston. Great to have you here. Listeners are all in for a really big treat today. So excited to hear from you. And you're not a pilot yet, but you have a very unique view on how entrepreneurs are using aviation in their business every single day. And that's probably because you meet a lot of us with your exposure on X, but also just through your network, and you're helping them with one of the biggest asset purchases they'll probably ever make. So maybe tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got here.
Simon, buddy, it is really good to be on the show. It's crazy how much X and previously Twitter has changed my life in the positive. And I'd say that most of my best friends right now I met through the app. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. So my main goal in kind of everything that I do, whether it's content or with aircraft finance, is I help entrepreneurs buy their time back. And so the only way that you can buy your time back is through private aviation. It is arguably either that or, maybe some of the buying an 8-sleep mattress or something. Those are really the only ways that you can, buy your time back. 8Sleep, if you're listening, that was a free plug. But if you would like to inquire about sponsorship, I'm sure Simon would take the inbound. Really, I am here to help entrepreneurs buy their time back. How do we do that? We do that through private aviation. Whether you're flying yourself or you're flying in the back seat, right? One of the two things. You're using it to propel your business, but also to be back at home. I was at a retreat with a bunch of really heavy hitter executives with some guys from X. And it was one of the topics that we were talking about was time and being home, being present for your family, being present in your community, being present in your business locally, expanding nationally or regionally. Private aviation is really one of the only ways that you can do that. People ask me, who's the most famous person that you've met? And I'm like, frankly, Chris Powers or like Nick Huber, right? Like, those are the kinds of famous people, if you will, that I've met by creating content around this topic, because at the end of the day, I'm not really here to work with Kim Kardashian and Jeff Bezos. Like, I'm here to help the Main Street entrepreneur buy their time back with private aviation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And then definitely I've heard similar things like, if you fly, you must meet all these people at the FBO and stuff. I'm like, no, I'm like meeting the random dude who owns an oil and gas company or someone who has a construction company. And it's been eye-opening to see how many small to medium businesses really are using aviation every single day. And you're obviously helping a ton of them do that. Do you use aviation at all in your business other than selling for it effectively?
It's cool how it really integrates well and connects well. I do use aviation, general aviation, for my business here locally. One of the motivation for me to get my pilot's license is my dad was a pilot before I was born. And so following in his footsteps is kind of the foundational piece for it. He flew bank checks and, documents overnight like a cowboy out of Atlanta around the Southeast and Midwest. For me, using general aviation to get to a meeting and be able to be home in a timely manner or be able to see multiple clients in tertiary cities, right? Because what I think a lot of people have in their mind, they have this picture of someone who uses general or private aviation. They have this picture, right? It's an investment banker from New York. They're getting on the Gulfstream in Teterboro and flying to LA. That is who they picture. Or I don't know if you watched the TV show Landman. I'm like halfway through it because I kept getting tagged about like, oh, the King Air that blew up, or like, all the different airplanes. And it's funny seeing like, oh, they just rolled in a Hawker 800, and then it's like, oh, look, there's a G4, and those are not the same. And also not the same as the King Air, right? But what people don't understand is that a lot of this takes place in tertiary cities that are a pain in the butt to get to. People are able to live where they want to. And you and I both kind of live in not exactly easy places to get to, commercial airline service standpoint, right? But general aviation unlocks you to me in a day, right? Like we could, in theory, you and I, even in a small general aviation aircraft, and we would be flying a lot that day, but we could have done this in person using general aviation.
Yeah, I mean, I could have been up at 5:30 this morning, got in the plane at 6:30, and I probably would have been to you for a brunch, 10 o'clock, something like that, pack the plane away. It's a big difference.
And commercially, that's a 12 or 14-hour trip, but we got to go through Atlanta at some point, right? Yep. Or Chicago, or, Charlotte or Dallas. Yeah,
exactly.
So big in like tertiary regional service businesses, that kind of thing.
Obviously, like FaceTime for a lot of businesses is really important. And that's a big reason for using aviation in your business, because you just can get more FaceTime. What are some other examples of where you're seeing entrepreneurs use aviation? I mean, you're exposed to so many different kind of categories, everyone from piston guys that are hopeful turbine guys like me, all the way through to the person who's buying the G6 sort of thing. What are the sort of reasons you're seeing them buy the aircraft, but also use it?
Yes. I mean, I'd say a couple different ways. You've got big and construction type companies, right? I've got a client that just closed on their third airplane in their fleet. They fly the other two aircraft. They've got started out with a Cirrus, and then they added a PC-12, and now they've added a super mid-sized jet. And they kept the Cirrus and they kept the PC-12. That PC-12 flies 450 hours a year. The Cirrus flies another 400 hours a year, and this super mid will fly. If it doesn't fly 300 in the next 12 calendar months, I will be surprised, because their business is growing hand over fist. But the PC-12 is a lot of times taking a foreman from a construction site in Florida to a construction site in North Carolina, and maybe 3 of their employees. Like, it's not just principal travel, if you will, right? Call it like the guy, right, in the back seat. So see a lot of that. See a lot of just-in-time manufacturing, same kind of idea. You need to move, like there's a Volkswagen plant here in Chattanooga. And so there's a lot of the suppliers that are kind of tangential to them will have some sort of exposure to general aviation, because they've got a plant here and they've got a plant in Greensboro, North Carolina. And like, it's a pain in the butt to get there, right? Especially after the Asheville flooding, like you got to go down and around or up and around. Like, you can't get there. You're flying an engineer, like an engineer that works for you, between the two plants, because they've got tribal knowledge or whatever. I've got a client who's a franchise owner. He owns a bunch of basement remediation or whatever company. And so he owns 7 or 8 franchise locations. He uses his Cirrus to fly, back and forth. You look like the Cirrus kind of profile buyer is like dead center of the bullseye for them. It's not buying a jet, right? But flying themselves and, using it as a tool. So really all over. A lot of real estate, real estate is very things that are time sensitive, real estate, things like that. And then people that just, love to fly. I mean, I like those clients too.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, you definitely, a lot of real estate guys that have aircraft, and you'd think like, oh, it's real estate, it's passive. They are on that plane, 3 days a week, going to a commercial facility that they lease in, Liberty, Kansas, or they're flying to Colorado, then they're back here, then they're everywhere. And it would just be nigh on impossible to do, commercially, even probably out of a big hub city like a Dallas or something like that. Is flying commercial every single day or 3 days a week is pretty rough. And if you're flying into a place like Liberty, Kansas, you're hubbing through somewhere, or you're flying to somewhere that's another 3-hour drive away, or those sort of things. And so aircraft, the only thing that can work, and I think I talked to you about this one before, but met a regional grocery chain regional manager, wasn't even the CEO, and he had just flown in on their PC-12, and he was telling me about the experience, and he said it's basically just like getting on a school bus in the morning because it's full of store managers and regional managers, and they're flying around dropping people off, or they can go and see 5 or 6 sites in a day, and they would just never be able to do that because they're all in these, small regional towns and that sort of thing. And I think we're very lucky in the US that we have airports everywhere, but also, I think it's quite unique here in the US that a lot of the regional towns and cities are economic powerhouses. The big cities, and it probably feeds a lot of the aviation, the growth in general aviation and private aviation for sure. Tell us a little bit about kind of what are some things that entrepreneurs need to know about purchasing an aircraft, because you're usually heavily involved in that process, and then what it takes to finance it. And maybe we'll sort of like hone in on owner flow and an entrepreneurial pilot, basically, or small to medium business that's buying an aircraft for someone in the business to fly. What do they need to know about buying it, and what do they need to know about financing it?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, the number one thing that I tell clients is like, look, it's a lot like a commercial real estate or a business transaction. Like, it's much more akin to that than like buying a car. This is one, like, make sure that you assemble a team around you that is making sure that you are like maximizing your value on your purchase price, making sure that you're not missing the things that you're going to miss. Like, you think about if you're a business owner and you're lucky, you'll buy 5 or 6 planes in your lifetime, right? Get a team that's doing 5 or 6 airplanes per month that's closing on these things, because they are going to know the things that you don't know in your business, right? Or, the business that whoever the entrepreneur is, like, they're the expert. Hire the experts in the airplane side, right? So usually an acquisition team looks something like this, especially for people who own businesses. A little different, like if you're just a guy, like kind of post exit, you probably don't have as much tax planning. Like, you may have tax planning, like, who knows? But usually, especially on like owner flown stuff, like the transaction team looks something like this. You've got some sort of buy-side broker representation that you directly. And I'm pretty about making sure that people understand that if somebody is doing this for quote unquote free, making money somewhere, and it's the lack of transparency that could get you into a sticky wicket. So somebody comes to you and says, hey, I'll help you buy an airplane for free, figure out where their actual incentive is to do any work. And that cost varies. In the owner flown market is a lot less, right? So like you get into like the jet world, and you got minimum acquisition fees of $100,000. In the owner flown piston world, it can be much smaller. I mean, a couple of my friends that do really good transaction services have kind of it's a base model, 3 to 5% with a floor of, call it $35,000, right? And what they're going to do in that transaction process is they're going to quarterback the entire process, right? So they're going to, whether or not you need get legal advice and legal advice, you don't need like a transaction attorney. I've got a pretty big transaction going on right now. We literally have aviation counsel that's on the acquisition team. You may or may not need that, not legal advice, right? Talk to somebody, see if it makes sense, see if you actually need it. But usually there's a buy-side broker, and they're quarterbacking the entire deal. You don't lose money on the sale, you lose money on the buy. Make sure that you've got somebody who's got your best interest in mind. So that's kind of the quarterback of the transaction. You've got your tax guy. There's a couple of really good ones that are out there. There's not a lot of really bad ones, to be honest. I mean, I've yet to kind of come across bad aviation tax people, but have kind of a tax person. They're going to do your dry leases, make sure that you're taking the depreciation in the right way, that it's up underneath the right operating entity. If you're like any entrepreneur, you've got 6 or 7 LLCs that are probably all going to have some sort of use for the airplane. You got to make sure that you set that up right. I mean, there's a lot of ways to go wrong there with the FAA and all that kind of stuff. And then if you're choosing to finance, then you kind of have your finance representative. So that's kind of where I come in, on your team, or somebody on my team who kind of come in alongside you. Make sure that we understand like what your structure is. What are you wanting to do with the airplane? What are your priorities, right? You look for, low monthly burn. You're looking for lowest interest rate possible, right? Cost capital conscious. Are you down payment conscious? You want non-recourse. There's products out there that'll be non-recourse. And then escrow, right? There's a couple of really good escrow agents out there. Please do don't be a cowboy. Don't think you can do this by yourself. If you jack up your FAA registration, and I have seen this happen, if you try and file it yourself, or your attorney says that they can file it for you, and they miss like 1 comma, or like a letter is wrong, your airplane becomes actually unairworthy, right? Like, it's like you're legally not allowed to fly it. Use an escrow agent, just like pony up, pay them their fee. And then you've got an insurance guy, right? So you want an insurance guy up alongside. Get somebody who really knows aviation, not somebody who does it as a hobby. It just makes things go a lot easier and smoother for you. So yeah, that's the team. That's who you assemble on the transaction. So that's usually what the players that we see kind of in the transaction side, 2 weeks or so to get a transaction done the right way, 2 to 3 weeks, give yourself about a month cushion, kind of depending on how, the more complicated your tax structure and your business structure and all of that, you just have like one operating business and like it makes a bunch of money and you're buying an airplane. Like that's one way, right? If you've got 12 LLCs that all feed each other and, yada, 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 it's going to take a little bit longer.
Absolutely. And what are some of the unique things about financing aircraft that people wouldn't know about? So for example, every time I tell people that an aircraft is typically like the amortize over like 20 years or more, they don't believe me because I think it's like a car, which is kind of crazy. And typically the interest rate is, lower than an auto loan and all those sorts of things. But maybe just give the audience a bit of an insight into kind of some of the unique parts of, doing a finance deal on a.
Yeah. So there's no such thing as subprime lending in airplanes. If you're a subprime borrower for whatever reason, right? Whether you had a bankruptcy or glitch or whatever, right? Unfortunately, there's just not a whole lot of options out there for you. That's part of the reason is that like you don't really have like the risk profile in the airplane loans. I mean, I've got some banks that I work with that have had a default in like 20 years. You're not talking about a loan portfolio that defaults very often. I mean, oftentimes if the airplane loan is going to go default, like you're already in free fall and you're going to short sell the airplane and get out from underneath it. But yeah, kind of structure wise, 20% down, just kind of depending on what you're looking for. You're looking at 15 to 20 year amortization on kind of standard owner flown stuff. For those that don't understand kind of the difference between term and amortization, if it's a 5-year term, 20-year amortization, you pay the payments as if it was a 20-year loan for 5 years. And then at the end of 5 years, it's a balloon, but you can refinance the balloon. I mean, I'm refinancing a balloon for a client that has a, big jet that it's coming due in March. And so we're just going to basically redo the loan, reset his rate and keep going. Amortize over 20 years. Today's rates, I mean, if you want 5-year in the 10-year treasury at all, and the overnight swap rates, like we're inverted again, it's kind of, things are being a little weird, but like kind of a good ballpark guesstimate is going to be somewhere between 6.75 and 7.75. That's kind of the like interest rate range that you can expect. Today's December 18th. I don't know when this is going to air, but just to give like a timestamp on what to look for. You're looking at like prime minus, prime minus 1 right now to prime, right? That's kind of the general that you can use to kind of benchmark. Different banks use different standards for like what they're setting rates at. But that's just like a good, general blanket statement. Couple variable options that are out there, right? If you want interest rate risk, you can take a variable loan and then lock it in later, 5-year adjustable, whatever, right? There's a for everybody out there at some point, that makes sense. Usually when I'm having a conversation with a client, it's, do I pay cash or do I use leverage against the airplane? I'm probably Dave Ramsey's least favorite person because I'm in debt on what a lot of people see as a totally luxury asset, right? So it's like a double whammy. But the clients that I work with, and probably a lot of your listeners, and if you're buying an airplane, like you have to be a little bit sophisticated financially. Like you didn't get to where you are by luck, unless you're, using generational money or whatever. And in that case, like just pay cash because, if you don't know how debt leverage works, kind of in your business. But I'm talking to these entrepreneurs and they're like, yeah, we're basically getting 15% internal rate of return on every new investment that we make or every new company that we purchase or every new location that we open. And airplane loans are secured against an asset, right? So there's an there, you can short sell it, right? If, like I said, right, if everything goes to crap, which like you have to think about what happens when everything goes to crap, right? If you newsflash, stuff goes to crap sometimes. Like if everything goes to crap, you can get out from underneath the airplane and not like, it's not like a working capital loan where it's like, okay, your business dries up, like tough luck, right?
You pay it back.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's like using it as leverage against an asset and saying, okay, look, that money works better somewhere else inside of my business. And frankly, if you're thinking that way and you're deciding between cash and an airplane, you become the most approvable borrower, which means you get the most competitive and best rates. So it's kind of like best of both worlds, right?
Yeah, not tax advice, but quite often it can be very tax advantageous to finance an aircraft and buy the aircraft. And if you've got a big tax liability and again, talk to your tax planner and professional, there are ways in which it can become quite advantageous to finance the aircraft, free up cash, and reduce, the tax burden legally.
Yeah, the back of the napkin math, again, not tax advice, not financial advice either, but the back of the napkin math that most of my clients are doing is basically, even in a 60% bonus depreciation environment that we find ourselves in now, but even way more so in 100%, essentially you're 20% down payment. You're going to, as long as in the tax bracket that I would assume that you're in if you're buying an airplane, you are 9 out of 10 times. Basically, you're reducing your tax liability by that 20%. That is it's not a perfect correlation, but it's close, right? It's close. Saying, okay, look, I'm going to put my 20% down, but I'm going to get that 20% back in tax savings or tax reduction in that year, right? So I'm going to basically let the government fund my 20% down from a tax standpoint. And then I'm going to make my monthly payments. You're man down the road eventually, right? But there is advantage. I mean, it's a depreciating asset. A lot of people out there that'll say that oh, airplanes appreciate. You've clearly only been here since 2021, right? Where airplanes did appreciate, but typically they don't. And they're not right now. They are depreciating. So there's an actual depreciation cost when you go to sell it, but you don't have to do the tax now. You get to write off a lot of the actual gas and maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So talk to a tax professional. I mean, if you need a recommendation, send me a DM on X, or maybe you can link my website, or just drop a note. Happy to make an introduction to somebody for you, especially those that will give you a free phone call and say, hey, it doesn't make sense to engage me. I can't save you any money, right? But yeah, there's a lot of tax advantages to it.
Awesome. How many aircraft are you going to try to finance in 2025?
25,
what would you like to do?
I would love to do 20 in 2025, kind of across the spectrum. I think it's definitely doable. I mean, I'm at 8 and kind of, call it fourth quarter. Fourth quarter is the big accelerated time, right? A lot of the people that I'm talking to and a lot of the people in the industry have this general feeling that Q1 is going to rip like it has never ripped before, because there's a lot of assumptions in the economy going into next year. So everybody's kind of saying, you know what? I'd rather clear.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Well, that's a pretty good goal to shoot for the to remind them 20 aircraft might mean in the hundreds of millions of dollars worth of financing. You're not necessarily financing the 1946 J3 Cub. That's not your game.
I really focus on $500,000 to 15 million. That's kind of the sweet spot where I can add a lot of value to the transaction. Once you get above 15 million, I mean, look, I am happy to work on it and happy to do it. If you're taking delivery of a $40 million airplane, please call me. I am happy to help. But typically those people are private client at one of the big 3 banks. They have a banker that looks at a holistic picture, right? I'm more in the transactional space, right? Where it's hey, look, I'm buying a plane and I bank with JP Morgan and they don't want to talk to me, and, can you help, right? I love working with owner-flown entrepreneurs. I don't really love doing flight school leasebacks, right? It makes things really complicated, and, the transaction volume is small. If you're buying an airplane and you're saying, look, I'm buying a PA-46 or maybe you're buying a SR-20, and you're saying I'm going SR-20 to SR-22 to Vision Jet to M2, that's kind of the, that's kind of natural progression or whatever, right? And you're saying, hey, look, I want to learn how to fly this for a little bit, move up, would love to talk to you and help you understand the landscape. And if I can add value, great. And if not, I mean, I give a lot of free advice. So
awesome. Just before we jump into the lightning round, what's the most memorable aviation fueled business trip that you've taken?
I was speaking at an EAA meeting in Lebanon, Tennessee. And for those people that are not read up on Tennessee geography, just outside of Chattanooga, which is the bottom right of Tennessee, up underneath the kind of pointy side. And Lebanon is almost dead center north. So it's a 2 to 2.5 hour drive if, and then if you get traffic, it could be 3.5. And I was speaking of this EAA dinner that had been asking me to come for a while. And so I was okay, cool, I'll come. And so I grabbed my instructor, Connor Underwood, Crystal Air, and he's the man. And we jumped in 737 Papa Juliet. And for those that are new in their aviation journey, it's a hilarious tail number for an upgraded 172 with a G3X touch. And so we fly this pretty on there, right? was I was using it to log time as well as I was killing two birds with one stone. His parents live 5 minutes down the road, so he went and got dinner with them. Overall, it was a great trip. No events on the way over there. We're coming back, and we flew VFR the way back. It was beautiful, cool, no turbulence, ripping tailwind. So we were 44 minutes from Lebanon to Chattanooga. It took us an hour and 5 minutes to get there because we had the headwind going. We get into the Charlie airspace. We check in with Chattanooga. I get on the radio. Chattanooga approach. This is 737 Papa Juliet. However many miles we were to the west. She goes, 737 Papa Juliet, are you a Skyhawk? And we were like, yes, ma'am. And you could hear her laughing when she clicks back in because, not only do you have the 737, but you also have the PJ part right at the end. So it's like, are you in a 737 PJ? No, ma'am. We are in a 1970s upgraded super horsepower 172.
That's so good. Well, at least you gave her a little bit of something interesting to laugh at all night. I feel like sometimes those approach controllers just cop it for their entire shift and then clock out. But that's awesome. Well, I'm glad that you're getting to use aviation a lot in your business. We'll jump into the lightning round. We've got about 5 minutes to go here. What's the fastest aircraft you've ever flown and the fastest you've ever flown in?
Fastest aircraft I've ever flown is a SR-22T on the way to Oshkosh. And man, after flying 172 in training, coming across the numbers in that thing, I was like, we're way fast. And the instructor was like, nope, this is the right speed. That is the fastest airplane I have flown. Fastest I have flown in Honda Jet. Yeah, I think Honda Jet would be right.
Honda Jet. And as we record this, Nissan, or in Australia we call it Nissan is potentially merging with Honda, and we were joking that maybe there will be a Nissan Jet towards the end of the decade. Maybe that'll go faster. Who knows? But
actually, I take it back. Phenom 300. I think Phenom faster than Honda Jet. So that is the fastest. And boy, do you feel it when you take off.
Yeah, man, that's a nice platform for sure. What's a dream aviation destination for you? Where would you like to fly?
I would love to go to Truckee, and I've got a client that has a pretty regular trip into Truckee, and so I'm hoping that maybe he will invite me out for some skiing or something.
Nice. It's a cool airport. I've never flown over it, but I've listened to the airport manager talk about the safety stuff that they've been putting in place there because they had a lot of accidents because it's a really tricky approach, particularly in weather and stuff like that and high altitude. And it looks like a cool airport to fly into in that area. Hard to beat anywhere in the US over that. Tell us about your dream aircraft and why.
Oh, dream aircraft and why. I know this is an owner-flown group, so they're not going to love this one. For me, I would love a Challenger 650. The reason is that they are the most aggressive looking on the ramp, in my opinion. And you unlock the International Gateway 650. And so if I couldn't afford one of those, I'd go Challenger 300. And then if I couldn't afford one of those, like a Phenom 300 would be, that'd be awesome.
Nice. You could do in a Phenom 300. You just have to stop somewhere, I guess, on the way. Go to Europe.
Yeah. Can you? Yeah. Can you? Yes. Should you? It's a long time in a small tube.
Yeah, it's very very true. Although I did speak to someone who'd been flying his PA-46 back and forth from Europe to here. It's a long way to go in a engine turbine, but seems to love it. But
he's got more guts than I do. Yeah. I want two engines if I'm going over that much water, that much freezing cold water, personally.
Me too. Do you have any advice for aspiring pilot entrepreneurs?
I would say decide that you want to do it and actually do it. Don't go in and out and in and out. And then to myself, to be totally transparent, I will be pedal to the metal on training, and then life happens. I've got a 3-year-old, and if you're going to do it, commit to it. Make sure that your business is in a place that can be without you for a few hours, right? Because what you don't want is to be thinking about the fires that you need to put out as you take off and thinking about the fires that you need to put out as you land every time, and not focused on your training and being in the moment. So make sure that, you give yourself the space to learn to fly, and then fly a lot, fly as much as you can.
My wife always says when I find something I love, I don't dabble. I go full in on everything, and it's probably flying is probably one of the things where that is very important actually to do as a default. I do find though when you're flying, it's this amazing way to block everything else out. Like there is nothing else I'm thinking about when I'm on base to final, or when I'm trying to shoot an approach, or I'm flying a procedure. Like for some reason, when I'm playing golf or whatever, I have in my head all sorts of ideas and stuff, which is probably why my golf game is so bad. But when I'm flying, it's like, I don't know if it's like a survival instinct or something, but I can't think about anything else other than flying the plane. And yeah, I would tend to agree with you. You have to be able to get your head into that sort of space and go at it and treat it like a job as opposed to a hobby, basically. Last one, what's one technology or tool that you think's transformed either your aviation experience or everybody else's?
Noise canceling headphones or headsets. If you've ever met any of the really old dogs that are out there, there's not many of them left, but the ones that did not use hearing protection definitely altered all of our lives, and I think that we probably take it for granted.
I would tend to agree. We got a lot of old warbird flyers down at Tulsa Riverside, and not many of them can hear anything. With old David and Clark, those green kind of ones, no active noise cancellation. And a couple of times when I've been up with them, I can't hear anything. It's just so bad. I don't know how they did it. Yeah. It's been great, Preston. Really appreciate your time. And I think you've given all of us some pretty amazing insight into the finance side of aviation, which is obviously extremely important, but also into the types of clients and what you see others, entrepreneurial aviation for. So thank you for your time. And I'll put all of your contact details in the show notes, but people can find you on X. Just Preston Holland, I believe, or at Preston Holland.
It's Preston Holland 6, and at Preston Holland, if you're listening, you have a DM that is asking what you're doing with that account. So
I'm pretty sure you're probably more popular than him. So if the search bar in X is working properly, it'll probably bring you up first. But that's probably the best place to find you. But otherwise, they can click on your website in the show notes, and you can help them get into a plane faster, bigger, better, and more financially sound. So appreciate it, Preston, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, man. You too.
Hey, thanks for flying with us today. If you're getting value from these conversations with other pilot entrepreneurs and executives, do me a really quick favor. Hit that subscribe button or the follow button, depending on what app you're using, so you'll never miss another episode. And if you've got an extra minute and you loved us, drop us a 5-star review. Those reviews help other aviation-minded business folk find us, and honestly, they really just make my day. What about you? Have you got a story about using your plane to grow your business, or maybe someone you know? Well, shoot me a message on X at Simon G. Turner or at the Chief Executive Aviator podcast, or pop me an email, simon@turneraircraft.com. See you on the next Chief Executive Aviator.